working remotely during the pandemic is one thing, and working remotely in a normal non-pandemic environment is another thing. So I would say it's the reverse, right? So before COVID, companies had the upper hand, and like there was no I mean, an individual wanting to work remotely never had any leverage. But COVID forced companies to go remote, which showed employees and individuals that remote work is possible. Like if you're forced to do it, you have nothing else, but you have to do it.
I think it's more impactful when you go into an office and be around the people you work with. Things move way faster, you learn way faster, you build good network, and a lot of our work will involve getting things done from multiple people.
What I personally vouch for is work from office with enough flexibility. Right?
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of OK Boomer. I think we are in episode number 7 if I'm not mistaken. We want to touch on a topic that is controversial to say the least. I think this is one of those topics that you ask anybody that you know, they definitely have an opinion on this. I'm sure there are a lot of other topics that we have done which may not have been universally appealing, but we can safely say that everybody cares about working policy for companies in terms of location. That is, hey, you want a work from home model, hybrid model, or coming in person to office. That's what we are going to discuss today.
Great. Good topic, actually, Chris Bot. I think three of us here who worked for the last 10 years with fresh works by nature, I think are more prone towards coming to office every day. It's just that it's been a lot of fun being in office for in the early days and even pre-COVID, until pre-COVID, right? So by that nature, I think all of us will kind of side towards going to office because we have a lot of friends who are also there. It kind of builds a community per se for a lot of us. But there are multiple aspects to it, right? I think we will cover from a lot of different vantage points of how is it beneficial for companies, what is pros and cons for an organization, and also being the nature of us being in different teams. Let's also get into how it helps with the productivity and like collaboration and learning and all of that. To start off with, there are a couple of pros. We'll kind of kick off with that, right? When you come to office, it's the nature of working for the company in their mission and like what we are here for. I think it's more impactful when you go into an office and be around the people you work with. Things move way faster, you learn way faster, you build good network, and a lot of our work will involve getting things done from multiple people, right? It's actually a little difficult to even know who does what when everybody is remote or when you don't go into an office. So that's actually a one like big thing I would say. When you go to office, you learn a lot more, and the your knowledge of what is happening around you is just way more when you are in an office.
I would want to say this, right? Like working remotely during the pandemic is one thing, and working remotely in a normal non-pandemic environment is another thing. So I think for most of us, the first experience of working remotely happened during the pandemic, and that's an outlier from what general timeline looks like. For me, work has always been a social environment and atmosphere, right? Like it's not just doing work that matters, but who you're around with really changes your perspective, your outlook, your energy levels, right? Like I'm a person who gets energy from being around people. Like if you put me in a place with no one, my output will not be as efficient as it is when you put me in a place with like 100 people around me. And I think that social energy really matters for people who are extroverted, people who get energy from being around people. Like I don't know how it would be for introverted people. Shankar can probably talk about that. But I think it's, for me, more than doing work or being in office, being around people matters. So even if it was remote, I would still be in favor of collectively meeting your colleagues in a place and working from a common place than from sitting at home alone and working.
I think Shankar is trying to get rid of introvert optics, and you are re-emphasizing that he's an introvert in this.
That's just he's saying that to annoy me. But anyway, labels aside, I personally feel that for a lot of companies, people working remotely, it might feel like you're in a dial-up connection versus working in office feels like you have like a high-speed bandwidth connection to your colleagues, right? So I just like the ability to like walk up to someone, talk about something, share an idea without having to like explicitly schedule a meeting. So I think for a lot of people where a lot of people whose work revolves around like sharing ideas, quickly getting alignment, talking through different versions of an idea and like focusing on one of them and like building, which is especially for product teams, design teams, engineering teams, probably if not for engineering, at least product and design. I think probably work from office makes a lot of sense. What I like, what I personally vouch for is work from office with enough flexibility.
My argument, or this is what I keep bringing up when people say this flexibility. See, like Body mentioned, pandemic was the domino effect of all of this, right? And now we are back to the old lifestyle. Like we go to restaurants, we go to movies, and we are asked to come back to work just like how children go to school. And why can't we just return to office 5 days a week like we used to do?
See, I think one thing, like even pre-pandemic, all of us were going to office every day. I think we are just returning to normal. Is just returning back to 2018 or 2019, right? But I think all of us have this question of, am I more productive at home? Like when I have 10 tasks to do, I do it in 1 hour when I am at home. But when I go to the office, it might take more time. That's one question. And I think a lot of us feel that commute is pointless. Like if I can just sit at home, sit in that room, and then get that done, why should I? Like, between the three or four of us here, we live, I think, 10 minutes or 15 minutes away from our office. But like, not that's not the case with most of the people, right? They move out of their hometown or family. They live away from their families, and or they commute like an hour or 1.5 hours to get to the place where they're going to do something which they could have just done at their home. I think that's the optics that a lot of us are debating. But the bigger question is, even for like leave company wanting us to come back, right? Like as an individual, it's not about doing those 10 things, but learning what your career, like where your career will take you, and building that connection for what you want to do is just way more better when you go to office versus when you sit in that room and get those 10 things done. Like why are you doing what you do? Like if you are like for example a salesperson or a product developer, knowing that role, or how do I grow, or what all the things that needs to be done, like from a wider role perspective, what does a company do? I think a lot of that learning happens in office, and it doesn't happen like as much as all of us wish it happened. It's very difficult if you just sit in your room and do those 10 tasks that
I'll
you are supposed to do.
probably add like one anecdotal piece of what I think, right? Like for people who join companies newly remotely versus people who already been there and established some form of social relationship with their colleagues, the way remote work works is very different, right? Like it's one thing to know people and then rely on getting help from them, learning from them virtually, and completely different when you don't know them, you've never seen them. And I'll even take like the example of freshers, right? Like at least in India, the education system doesn't incentivize people asking questions, doesn't incentivize people saying that they don't know things, right? Like when a fresher out of college comes and joins a company remotely, they are not going to be, at least there will be a mental block in saying that they don't know and they need help and they don't know
I
who
think
to
it's
reach
it's
out
one
to.
thing about them asking questions. Also, the other thing of the expectation is for them to know, and how are they going to know? We don't know. Like, a lot of people just
So
expect people to know things.
I think there will be that inertia when when you're in a completely new environment and starting out remote. That I think is difficult. Like you can have all the documentation in the world, you can have all the guided tours, you can have as much knowledge put out there as possible, but discovery is really difficult, right? Like if knowledge and discovery was so easy, then like people don't need to go to college. People can just read, what is there on the internet and get education. But there is some level of guidance required, not necessarily hand holding, but at least directional inputs, which is just easier to facilitate in person than remote.
I think, can we compare this to, say, going to a B school? Like a lot of people try do an MBA, go to a B school. It's I think the bigger part of going there is to meet like-minded folks and have and connect with someone at your IQ level or the skills that you would have. And knowledge and learning is just a byproduct. Like people don't, I think majority of people who join B school is not for the knowledge. I think they would get it elsewhere as well. But that connection that you make by going there is what really matters. That's what sets people who graduated from IIM, who founded companies, that's what sets them apart. So like I'm just, when Body told that, I was just relating it to people going to
I'll
B schools.
probably give a counterpoint in terms of for what remote work might be helpful. I think remote work really opens up avenues for, like, we are probably not the target audience, right? Look, it really opens up a lot of opportunities and avenues for uh, new moms, for people with disabilities, for people who are generally coming to office may be difficult, right? Like the what stage of your life will determine how easy or how difficult it is coming out of your home and coming into an office, and everything else that you're privileged to be part of. Like all that also matters, and I think we probably are not reflective of who remote work might actually be beneficial for, but I think there is a considerable number of people for whom it is beneficial.
Even the companies that genuinely want to like offer hybrid work or like remote work, do you feel like they don't really think actively about how to make life easier for employees who are working remotely? Because I feel like invisibly there's like a significant advantage for people who come to office or who work hybrid versus people who have life situations who want to work remotely. So do you feel like companies should do better to ensure that people who are working remotely feel more included and things like that? Because I don't see a lot of people talking about it or thinking
I,
about it.
I will add to what Shankar said because that was also going to be my question. It's very evident that companies want you to come back to work, right? And like Shankar pointed out, companies don't equip you really well to do work in a hybrid model. They would rather you come and do the work at office, right? And why do we think that is the
Yeah, so I think it goes way beyond just what the company is thinking at this point. Like if we kind of historically go back, we've just been built the whole workforce industry, like industrialization and assembly line, all of that is built over the last hundreds of years with the model of people coming together in one place and working together, right? Like leave office, like office and this AC setup and like everything is conference room are all like new in the last 2 or 3 decades. But the whole work until now over the last hundreds of years has been built considering everybody comes together and get things done and then goes back, right? So there's just so much of our historical, say, things, how we used to do things are in play here. It's difficult to change just because COVID happened. Like just because in 1 or 2 years we are now thinking, hey, can we do the same thing if you're in the same room? How do we develop companies like without having to be there in person? I don't think it's a change that will happen overnight or in 1 year or 2 years. Just like how it took so many years for us to build an economy of how currencies trade and like all of us come here and get something done and then get money from someone, make a transaction. It will take a lot of time to revolutionize this model, right? Few companies might be doing it, but still, it's very, very, very rare for someone to not have met at all and be able to trust and be able to do something great. It's just very, very, very rare. I've not heard of cases where you can trust someone without even meeting, and you are able to put your
Do
life
you,
ambitions and stuff, right?
do you think in our lifetime technology advancements will make it easier, and like think of like metaverse, right? Like I grew up watching Johnny Quest World, right? Like where you are sitting here, but the virtual world, you are all in the same place, right? Doesn't seem far-fetched to be very honest. Like I think we are closer to seeing that happen in reality, and that might actually, like, even the odds for a lot of situations like this.
Something like
What do you
I
guys
was
I
think?
always amazed at Star Wars calls, how they make that video calls in Star Wars.
I don't know about metaverse, but I think companies are interested in one, making you productive and making you stay longer. And I feel like they believe that if you come to office, form these friendships or get to know people, there's like lesser reason for you. I mean, they can see for themselves that you're productive. I think there's a certain element of like being able to watch employees without being unsure about whether they're actually doing work or not. That's something that's in
Yeah.
companies' minds.
It's
Second
very
thing is, yeah.
go ahead.
The second thing is, I think, yeah, I think there are fewer chances that you will actually stay longer if you're working remotely than if you're like working in office and you form these relationships. So it's a win-win situation for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. When you get into office, you kind of zone out from the real world, right? So you could be productive, you could be having a bad day, that doesn't matter. But when you're in the office setup, you're kind of forced to think about problems related to work. What are you going to work on next versus, you know, if you're at home, like, hey, maybe I'll just, catch 20 minutes of Netflix while I'm having lunch. That simply doesn't happen in office, even though nobody is stopping you from doing that.
I would flip and say this, right? Like companies optimize for the lowest common denominator. So the vast majority of people may not be able to structure their time and work. They're not going to be very well disciplined about it. So for the vast majority, it makes sense to police it and say you work between 9 to 5, and uh, after that you're free. But
You come and
to
work in
be
front
very
of us.
honest, no, no. To be very honest, it's the reverse, right? So if you have individuals who are very disciplined, who are very structured, who can do their work efficiently and optimally, you can actually get more work done if you are allowing them to work remotely, because like work doesn't happen at a stretch. It only happens in spurts. Like I think in any profession you're in, right? Like if you're in a software developer role, if you're in a creative role, if you're in a sales role, like you can't always be optimally producing output. Like the graph will never be straight or like vertical from say 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It'll always have disjoint breaks here and there. If you are able to uh, build flexibility around that, like allow you to work when you have your highs and allow you to take breaks during your lows, that's the best win-win for any company that wants to maximize output. But that is insanely hard because it requires, I mean, it's not on the company, it's on the individuals actually.
And as an individual, like even for me, like for generally for people who are thinking, what's the benefit of going to the office when I can get things done uh, when I'm home? As an individual, you feel lot like you trust a lot more of the company and the cross functional teams that you work with when you actually go in person and you just are around the team and you kind of see what's happening, right? It's difficult to build, like of course you trust your first team and your manager, all of that. Even if you're remote, there's a good amount of conscious effort that will go into building all of that. But cross functional relationships and teams that you depend on to get your work done, if you're remote, getting that trust is just very difficult. You would always think the other team is not doing anything. When you are not able to get something done, your first thinking is, hey, no other team is working, my team is the only team that's working, right? So that, as an individual, like, just if you're a remote person, for anyone who's watching this, if you have an office, just go to office at least once in 2 weeks, or like, if you're in another city, just go there 2-3 days, just see how other cross-functional teams are working, just go talk to them. You would feel a lot more confident that there are things happening around you that you don't know of.
I think remote also like makes the work transactional with others. So you're just going and asking stuff, they're getting things done, or you're getting things done for somebody else. And until like you meet people a couple of times in an offsite or in the office, it really feels like you don't have any relationship, right? So work from home permanently definitely makes your relationship with colleagues super transactional. It becomes like, okay, this person is chatting with me, asking me something, giving me goals, but I actually don't know this person. I don't have a relationship with them, right? So I think meeting people at least occasionally, if you're working remotely, makes a huge difference. And having those random conversations makes everything feel more human going forward. I
I'll
think that's
actually
what
throw
Ashwin is
in
saying in different words. Yeah.
I'll actually throw in like a Black Mirror dystopian ending, right? Like, if whatever Ashwin said, if the opposite of that were true, if all processes were very smooth, and you don't need to build a relationship with someone, and you can just get work done by following a process or following steps, then you wouldn't need humans to do it. Like, AI can do it for you. So probably, like, remote workers will be the first ones to get impacted by AI and bots.
That's a pretty bold statement, buddy.
Possible, can happen.
I think it depends on the company, right? So there are companies that have made remote work like automatic, the WordPress folks, right? So
GitLab.
you can't make you can't make a statement that a worker at WordPress are automatic. Their work
See,
would like get fully automated.
no,
But I
no, I'm
agree,
not
by and
saying.
large, yeah.
I'm saying
Yeah.
it depends on the company on what they want to do, right? But if all the benefits that a remote worker is enjoying, you're saying, basically means I can get that done without a human in that place, like in an ideal world. So if I were running a company, remote workers would be the first ones to be replaced by bots.
Only if there's chaos, there is work for us.
Yes.
Chaos is ladder.
One thing I was surprised by is I thought more companies like Automatic or GitLab would emerge post COVID era, and
Very good.
those companies would extol the virtues of remote work. But I don't think that has happened. That's
Lowest
surprising to
common
me.
denominator. You want everyone to be disciplined. You want people to write pages of documentation for people to read through. People don't have the
Yeah,
energy or patience to
I
read through
agree.
things. Right? Like, you
Yeah,
and
I
I like
agree
reading
that
long
most of the
form.
companies, yeah, I agree most of the companies won't be remote like Automatic or whatever, right? But there's no new brands that I'm seeing that
Yeah.
are really
I think
promoting
it's
remote work.
also, I think it's also reflective of times. Like, most of Gen Z attention span is very less. ADHD is prevalent in most people who are in the working class right now, right? So it's extremely harder today than it would have been like 10 years ago to actually make remote work easy and make it work, because nobody is ready for going through all the documentation. Like, there needs to be some effort and pains to go through before you can make it successful. I don't think people are willing to sign up for that in today's world.
Yeah,
Body, I
true.
actually agree with you, but this is my question. So the people who actually succeed in that, we can assume that they are very disciplined, self-motivated people who can really thrive without somebody monitoring them at workplaces, right? Don't you think a very strict return to office policy actually alienates people like that, and they just choose to move on to companies that offer this?
Who's standing to gain there? The companies have hundreds of people who are not the exception. They can always hire from. These exceptional people have very small, limited number of companies to go to. So mathematically, the odds are in the favor of the companies, not the individuals. The numbers don't lie.
You should be really, really, really good and be better than you should be able to make 100x the impact of one individual to be able to
You
have the
should
odds in your
literally be
favor.
a star. We should be able to see your brightness from light years away.
True,
Those
true. And
reference.
because Shankar mentioned about automatic and all, right, and I also feel there is no playbook from those kind of companies to actually find the right hire. Like making it work when you are remote depends on the people you hire. It's a hit or miss, right? Uh, there's no playbook,
I think
to be honest. Like,
more than remote, finding the hire, also enabling and training them also matters, right? So both need to work. You need to find a person who's ready and able and willing to do all of this, and you need the right infrastructure and support systems to enable that to work. Most companies have either or, so at best they have a 50% chance of being remote.
I'd also be like really interested in like talking about how this whole remote hybrid thing has moved jobs from Western countries into emerging countries. I know this has been a very prevalent in service industry over the last 20 years, 30 years. In like product companies, like we know a lot of companies from here, like a couple of HQs from Seattle are also opening up offices in Bangalore and Hyderabad. Like those are office roles, but still this whole remote collaboration, and you can still do the work when you're far away from a HQ or from where the product was originally built. I think that has facilitated a lot, but you still have to go to the office and do it. But the job has moved far away because of enabling so much remote and collaboration.
I don't know if that's because of COVID or because I don't know what made people realize that post 2020 we could have. Yeah, I don't know if it's because they realized that remote work works that they ended up hiring a lot of people in India where the location didn't matter, or if it's another factor altogether. Post 2020, I don't know.
I think the factor was people weren't allowed to get out of their houses, Shankar.
I would say it's the reverse,
Mm.
right? So before COVID, companies had the upper hand, and like there was no, I mean, an individual wanting to work remotely never had any leverage. But COVID forced companies to go remote, which showed employees and individuals that remote work is possible. Like if you're forced to do it, you have nothing else, but you have to do it. I think it's the collective mentality of people wanting to live their lives, because COVID took away a few years of their lives, right? Like that, I think, is the more uh, deciding factor of actually making remote work in today's world be a contender for hybrid and in office work. Like I don't think it would have stood a chance earlier.
Post 2020, I felt like the world woke up more to like realizing the quality of Indian engineers than before. But I'm not able to pinpoint it to a factor. Yeah.
Well, I think we should read about some study, or I don't know if there is some study that will be in work now. But I've seen the trend where when I talk to a lot of friends over here, like a lot of roles now are teams are now being moved to their Bangalore office or Hyderabad, or they are also opening an office in Gurgaon, right? But those roles would have been here, like either in Bay Area or in Seattle, but now they are able to move those roles in India and still develop what they wanted to develop. Uh, I think it world is just awakened. We'll just see what triggered. Is it COVID, or is it having 2 years of remote has just enabled and given confidence to a lot of people? Yeah, but good chat as usual with the three of you. uh, I think in general, from a company perspective, like Body said, always the odds are in the favor of the company to get people back to office. It's just a human nature. Like there is just very few stars versus regular person who comes to work. So the stars might feel like, hey, I'm able to do a lot more at home, but for the company, they're optimizing for that 99% of the people. They would definitely want you back. As an individual, like most of us who can relate to people who are in our wavelength and in our age and group, I think all of us would love to go to office just to meet people, given situation, circumstance, everything is aligned, right? We don't have 1.5, 2 hours of commute. We don't hate like going, taking 2 or 3 buses and then one train. Like if all those things aren't there, I'm sure we would enjoy going to office. But as an individual, at every point in time, you'll have to optimize for what phase of career you are in, where you are in with age and family circumstance. A lot of that. Early stages of career, for sure, like I would say going to office will help in understanding where you want to be in life or building relationships, building network that will help you later on in life. Once you know you've done enough or you know enough, I think that's the place you can start phasing out. Like in a sense, going there is not for learning, but going there is to continue building relationships and networks. But yeah, as an individual, take your call at any point in time, depending on where you are in your life phase and how your situation and circumstance are. Uh, any closing thoughts, buddy? I think you have something to say. What's it?
Don't forget to like, share, and surprise.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Shankar. Thanks, Paul.